Welcome back to the Naked Podcast. This is Janelle, and today's episode is a little different. There are no guests, it's just me and something I wrote. I haven't always written. It's something I kind of stumbled into a few years ago without really knowing the why behind it. But over time, it became really clear that writing is where I find clarity, healing, and perspective. I've been writing quietly for years now, and for the first time, I'm starting to share it publicly, starting with you. I'm honestly so excited, but equally as scared to let these pieces live outside of my notebook. It feels extremely vulnerable and raw. I want to thank you for being here and for listening. This is a giant leap for me. If something I share speaks to you, I would love to know more about it. Or if maybe you know someone who might need to hear this, just pass it along. Thanks again. This past year was different in ways I didn't expect. It evoked parts of me to rise that I have quieted. This one is fresh, and in some ways I'm still digesting it. If it was a painted piece, I'd say the paint is still tacky, because it feels like I'm still soaking it in and still learning what all of this is about. But I am also fully and completely enamored of how it brought so much awareness to me. I can see how it's changing me and changing my relationships with those around me. So without further ado, welcome to Naked Notes. For most of my life, I've had quite a noisy head. Thoughts bouncing and spiraling one into another. They drove what I did and how I did it, creating an angst that kept me moving, something about myself I've known for a long time. A while ago, I was thinking about this as I was driving on a long country road. Green fading into shades of yellow and orange. A brisk, cool morning, the kind that screams fall. A time of year that I enjoy just about as much as spring, when little buds spiral into countless leaves. This country morning had my attention. I noticed how the leaves gently waved, how a branch in the distance bent into an arch, making a perfect heart at the top of a tree. The sun slowly rising, I watched it inch its way into my rear view mirror. I promised myself I would take minutes every day to stop and see some of nature's best work. I did. I parked somewhere between here and there on a road few traveled at this time of day, seeing and feeling. It's moments like these that I was sure were rewiring my brain, the way I was thinking and doing things, confident that these pauses were a much-needed solution to the angst, the relentless urges to be and do. The thing that'll calm the rattles, wanting this to be the win. Finally I had it. I had finally figured it out. It was clear though, after a few of these stops on dirt roads, though this was beautiful and beauty really did have all of my attention, this didn't change the perpetuating rattles, the subtle trembles that tingled just beneath my skin. I've always had the urge to help. Maybe some would call it an addictive urge, but I've never seen it that way. I really believe I came by it honestly. From a young age, I remember seeing what kindness and care can do when my parents opened their home and arms to a woman who had 2 little girls. Joanne would periodically find the courage to leave the abuse, and when she did, Mama would hold her and pray for her, feed her and wipe her tears. This was a window, a view of what courage and kindness looks like. And it changed me. It opened my 7-year-old eyes to a world beyond mine, and I was determined that I would build a ranch for girls so they could have a safe place to call home. This has never left me, and it's something I still plan to do. I've always loved to help people, whether it was giving my mom a hug because I could see she was having a hard day, or buying a meal for a stranger that appeared to be going through a tough patch in life. I love to give. The act of doing something for someone else just fills my soul. But I've realized that my helping can be hindering, especially for those I'm close with, because it doesn't stop with doing 1 or 2 nice things. I so easily get lost in doing because I hope for them, and with that comes me wanting to change their circumstances. I can recall times when I have pleaded with people that I love to see how small actions could result in a much stronger, healthier version of themselves. I find it so painful to watch someone I love not love themselves the way they could, and by that, I mean their actions don't line up with what I would hope for them. These hopes turning into internal turmoil, an ache, a grief. It sits like knots in my belly, feeling like there's only one thing to do. Show up, take their hand, be the guide. A few months back, I was sitting on a floor in a house that we were calling home at the time, a 200-year-old stone home with 7 bedrooms, a wood stove, worn-in hardwood floors, solid wood doors with that wide, thick trim, and the most ornate fabrics. This house had been loved and lived in, and right outside the front door stood a floor-to-ceiling glass workshop filled with blooming flowers. Immediately, I imagined myself sitting next to the blooms writing. I've dreamed of places like this, but being in a space like this was a first. All of Scotland's warmth seemed to be wrapped up in these walls, and I couldn't wait to see how we would do life here. Until I got a call from my sister that I instinctively knew was coming. My dad was in the hospital. I was unsure what the knowing fully meant, but it felt scary, and I knew that I had to be there. There are so many layers to going back to Canada, a place I used to call home. So many old ways of doing, of being, of showing up. My son asked me, "Mom, what version of you will come back to us after you go back?" A question I was already asking myself. Because I know my tendencies, how my heartbeat changes, how my eye twitches return. But I was determined this was going to be different. I had learned much, right? I knew that walks in nature calmed my mind and that my morning routine was an essential part of my day. I had had enough time in these daily practices to realize the me that emerges when I do the things that water my life. The things that not only allow me to grow, but actually cause me to grow. I did do things differently. I took time for walks. I climbed the tallest hill to watch the sunset. And on my daily early morning drives to visit my dad in the hospital, I stopped, got out of the car, and watched the sunrise. It felt good to take the pauses in amongst the fears, chaos, tears, and questions. I was doing things differently. But for me, it so easily shifts, like a flipped switch. You see, I'd gone back to support my parents, to keep my dad company in the hospital, to give him massages, bring him his favorite snacks, and also stay with my mom to hug and hold her when everything felt like it was so unknown. I wanted to be the strength they could lean on, a pillar. But ever so slowly, that moved into how can I help them change their lifestyle, live better, stronger, so they can age gracefully according to my ideas. Suggesting and implementing things like exercise, physio, healthy eating, and slow candlelit mornings. So many wants that I wanted for them. The truth is, they were making changes that felt right to them, while I was noticing what hadn't changed. So I missed out in celebrating that monk fruit had become the replacement for refined sugar, a real win for them. The truth is, there were so many wins, celebrations, and memorable moments that I can see now. But while I was packing for the next in our lives, preparing to say goodbye to them, these words, "What have I learned?" danced and swayed in the back of my head. These words had been popping up for a while. The truth is, I thought I knew what I had learned. So much so that I have half-written pages because I was certain that I knew. But every time that I would attempt to get my thoughts on paper, I would come to a standstill, looping through it over and over again until recently, when I was sitting on my bed, thinking about a book that I am currently reading, The Let Them Theory. I've taken this book in slowly, just short 15 minutes of reading a day, so I can process and fully understand where and how I see myself in each chapter. At first, I wasn't so sure what this whole theory was about. Do I completely stop caring? Is that what let them means? For me, that felt like a ridiculous ask. How could I just let them and walk away? I remember hearing Mel chat with a couple about not going home for Christmas. As I watched the guy's face when she said, "If you don't want to go home for Christmas, then don't." His mouth gaped open like, what? How could I do that? That seems so selfish. She replied with, "What's selfish is you going and not wanting to be there. So you make an excuse to leave early because you didn't want to go in the first place, leaving yourself as a victim in the situation. The truth is, your parents like you, which is great, but if you choose to go because you feel like you have to go and the whole time you're upset about it, you've now turned yourself into the victim. Your parents never asked you to be the victim, they just invited you over, and it's okay to say no. Because maybe you do need a Christmas off." I have replayed this conversation in my head over and over again. I think the part that got me the most is the victim part. How choosing to say yes to something can turn me into the victim without ever noticing. This whole thought got me on my own trail of thinking. Do these hopes and wants turn me into the victim because they aren't doing what I prescribe for them, creating internal turmoil that leads to frustration, anger, and resentment? The thing that pulls me away from the ones I love, a barrier that I quietly build with every action that doesn't meet my expectations? This has been particularly present in my marriage. I have years of letters. Some I have written and read aloud because I wanted more for us. I imagined a life where the one I loved, the one I said I do to, would love himself by doing the things that would create the best version of him to rise. A life where he dreams and grows, so I could do the same. But instead I used my words to try to make him see that he deserves more. I would try to lead by doing, maybe if I got up early, maybe if I worked out, maybe if I ate healthy, maybe if I wrote or didn't drink or had more patience, maybe if I was more mindful of money. But no amount of doing was enough. Have you ever tried to spur someone on by doing it first, encouraging change by showing them it's possible? I have, and it's exhausting because I wasn't doing it for me. I was doing it for him, trying to lure him into a life I thought was better so I could feel more connected and move at a space that felt more rhythmic, more us. The truth is, I just wanted for him. I wanted so much for him, but in my pursuit to do the things that might spur him on, I became fixated by his starts and stops. Somewhere along the way, him and his ways of doing became my problem, a problem I felt responsible to fix. So letters continued until I realized all of this is a distraction, and while I am happily distracted, I am becoming less sure of my capabilities, less confident in who I am, less focused on where I am going, creating less joy, ease, and playfulness in my life. Because all this had somehow become hinged on him, on the wheres and hows and whats of his life. I was afraid that if I didn't somehow take him with me, that we would lose touch. The gap would become too far for us, and maybe we wouldn't be able to find ourselves back to each other. The fear of losing what I had already lost became clear to me, and so I did let go. I realized it's not up to me. It doesn't matter how hard one is trying, if both aren't reaching, the gap will never close. This is both empowering and scary. The idea of letting go of the one you so desperately hope for, giving them their own reins while you grab hold of yours, it's terrifying because we come to grips that we aren't in control. We don't get to decide. These battles aren't ours to win, and when and if they choose to be the champion in their story, that'll be their accomplishment, just as much as your wins are yours. Realizing this, I became aware that it's not up to me to be consumed by how often he calls his mom, if he connects with his friends or has relationships with our kids, if he wakes up early or decides to run a marathon, or if he dreams for his future. These are not within my control. Coming to this realization has been freeing but also scary, because I know that our choices have the option to bring us closer, or the alternative, a natural gap will find its way between us. But I don't get to choose our outcome. I just get to choose my next, and then my next, and then my next. Here's the thing. These wants aren't isolated to my family. No, they've often extended far beyond to my friends, those distant and near. Over the years, I can recall my friends living in what they would call not so abusive relationships. Because there was nothing physical. It was just words. Angry, uncontrollable, hateful words, but words nonetheless that would soak deep into their hearts and minds. Standing with a bit of distance, I could see that these words were causing my friends to become smaller. Women who are less sure of themselves, so they shrink. A life that feels too muddy to find their own clarity. I would go to sleep thinking about them and wake up thinking about them, hoping, really hoping that they would see that they don't deserve to live in the quiet, trying to protect and duct tape what's been shattered for so long. Noble, right? Caring for friends. I'm sure many of you felt the same way. We want better for people. Only I didn't realize how this hope and want for people that I love had become such a commendable trait, because my desires for them always results in me doing something, more often than not, doing many, many things. And while these things consume me, other people in my world notice the care and attention that I give and take note on the boundless effort, commenting, "They're really lucky to have you. Gosh, what would they do without you?" These words were like confirmation that I was what they needed. Just adding a little more fuel to my fire, that if I just helped a bit more, gave just a little longer, then they would turn the corner. Then they would reach for their potential and all the waiting would be worthwhile. Here's my problem. Over the years, my hopes for my friends, my husband, and my family has created my own unhealth. I have spent years worrying, wondering how I could help ease their struggles. But there is no amount of conversations, healthy meals, workout plans, heartfelt letters, pleading, or anything else that will change their lives. The truth is, they have to want for themselves more than I want for them. I think the real kicker is realizing that the angst I feel is because I can't control the outcome. I would never think of myself as a controlling person, but I see that somewhere in me, that's it. I want to control the way life unfolds because I genuinely care, but my care for them casts shadow on my own life, which has created a disdain for returning to a place I called home. I've muttered words like, "I'm just not my best self there. I can't get off the crazy train," not realizing that the rattle comes from within me, in the urge to show up, to be and do, inserting myself into decisions that aren't mine to make. I was never meant to be the fixer. No one asked me. I just owned that role. A noble role that has kept me far from focusing on the things in my life that I can change. I've been distracted, too overwhelmed with other people's things that I've avoided my own. When this thought that I'm trying to control, and by doing so, I have totally lost my own peace, placing myself in the seat of being a victim, God, it disgusts me to even say that because I cringe at the idea of someone victimizing themselves. But when I've shown up over and over and over again because I feel like I'm responsible for their well-being, a space that was never meant to be mine, their wins or losses don't rest on the backs of my shoulders. No. Allowing me to play small and shrink in my own story as I've highlighted the stories of those around me, allowing me to fade into the distance. This is just the first layer behind the why of me learning to let them. Let them, yes, but why? Behind it, understanding that these wants, the endless doing, are the glossy, commendable distractions. This is what changed it for me, which changed all of my relationships. In some kind of way, it feels redemptive. This profound understanding really got me, like holy shitballs. I wanted to call everyone I knew, scream it from the top of a mountain, freak out and jump on my bed. Like I finally got it. I finally figured out where all the knots and aches in my belly were coming from. It's this that shifted my spiraling thoughts, changed what I do with my time and where I spend my energy. I've realized that I can go home. I can say yes, but I can also say no. I can write that book. I can be confident. I can dream. I can make money. I can build that ranch. I can be strong. I can have momentum. I can speak and grow and be me. All of this is just a choice that forces me to shift my stance, to change where I'm looking, to decide if I'm going to run towards the things I've avoided or stay small, looking for the next noble distraction. I get to choose. I know that I will always care, but I'm choosing to shift what care looks like. Of course, leaving room to listen and have an ear to hear. But I will know that this, whatever it is that they are going through, isn't mine to fix. It's not mine to lose sleep over or to try to concoct a plan of action. No. I will hear and then let them. So I have room in my heart and my mind to let me be free, to move towards me. So let me love me by doing the things that I have put on hold for far too long, knowing that it's in my own liberation that others will find their own freedom, or maybe not. Either way, theirs is not mine. Thank you for joining me here and listening to Naked Notes. I have found writing to be very healing, allowing me to see things clearer through the quiet stillness that comes from early morning writings. If this resonates with you or somehow you feel connected to this piece, I would love to hear from you. You can find me on Instagram at nakedwithjanelle or email me at nakedwithjanelle@gmail.com. Thank you for listening. Have a beautiful day.